this before. Hello, hello, hello. On my way. What the hell? On my way to pick up the kiddo. So, I want to cook today, and I want to cook protein. So that means I'm gonna be up on my growl. Ooh, that's cute. They're the same cars. See, I look at what people are doing on their property. Ooh, there's a tennis wall. I can come here and hit the wall. I didn't know that. Now I know that. And I have to find my tennis racket. Listen, after like in 2024, when we had that flood, I don't know where the majority of my stuff is, honestly. And I know a lot of it got tossed out, you know? And I'm traumatized, honestly. Like, is me being absolutely fucking traumatized because I don't even have the words to talk about that. But today is the day that Abraham Lincoln said was going to be Thanksgiving Day, and then it got turned into Indigenous Peoples Day. And the story doesn't really get out because the people who talk about what happened on Thanksgiving, they talk about it in terms of the extremes. I do think that one extreme is more valid than the other. I think I do. I'm not sure, but I'm scared to say that because, you know. So, one of the extremes is the one that most of us have existed forever, which is the lie about like it was the first dinner in the harvest of between the pilgrims and the indigenous people. So that's one of the extremes. That is not the neutral point. And if you don't understand why that is not the neutral point to perpetuate that lie and make it a national holiday, then I'm not going to be able to explain that or give foundational background for why that is in this particular short live. So I apologize for that. The other extreme, which is the one that I'm saying I'm biased towards, is the extreme where people are like, and mostly indigenous people are like, fuck Columbus Day, and he didn't discover shit. We were here we were here centuries before this motherfucker showed up. That's the other extreme. And then there's the view that I think is neutral, and that's the one where it's based on history, right? So, well, they're both kind of based on history, but what it is if you remember the Mayflower and Jamestown or whatever, that wasn't the first time that Europeans tried to colonize this land that belonged to, or that was inhabited by indigenous people and belonged to the greater spirit, right? As the culture says. Hiya, Dev. Welcome back. Hi, Sadula. So I'm talking about Columbus Day because it is a national holiday today in the U.S. So Europeans had tried before, but they were unsuccessful, right? And so what they did was they came the trip before, okay? It's easier to see it that way. And they spread diseases. So they handed out disease blankets is the most famous, right? Or notorious, I should say, story. They give out disease blankets and completely almost disseminated the indigenous population. And then they came back on the Mayflower at that point. And the indigenous population there was just not a lot of, if any, resistance, right? And so what they would do too when they would come in their failed attempts, they would steal indigenous people and take them back, right, to sell them into slavery, right, or have them as slaves. And there was one particular individual, and his whole tribe was completely wiped out, by the way. But he had been taken over to Europe, and he learned the language and everything like that, and he was a slave for the person who took him, right? And when he came back to the US, he was used as the translator, okay? And what happened at that point is treaties, negotiations start being brokered, and the first tribe to shake hands with the colonizer, the invader, okay, is the tribe to then be able to point at their enemy and say, hey, we need to disseminate those ones, okay? And so, and it goes, and so it goes on and on and on. But anyway, what ended up happening on Thanksgiving was this, they had, the invaders, the European invaders, had been taught how to grow crops, because they didn't know how to grow shit, you know, and it was just very unsuccessful before. So they gave blankets, spread diseases, wiped out, you know, almost wiped out the indigenous population, and then the ones that they had taken with them and like sort of like brainwashed. Think about it as, I'm in America, so I'm going to use America as an example. The education system in America, and also when people come to do their citizenship, it is literal indoctrination into white supremacy. I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks about what I said. Like I said, I have a master's in counselor education and educational psychology, okay? Was licensed, a degree, a master's. Was licensed as a K through 12 counselor. I've been all up in these motherfucker schools. My doctorate is in counseling psychology, okay? And I did IEPs for the schools and things like that. This shit is for the fucking white nationalist, okay? And I don't care what anybody says, okay? So let me back away from the TV with that intensity now. So, or the screen, I should say. Your TV, hopefully, not just your phone. Because I look better on TV, just so you know. My husband says that. So anyway, what they did is, so that person, you know, that indigenous person, then gets brought back, and the indigenous folk, like the natives, are like, yeah, we trust that person. That's our brother, you know. So that's how basically, what is it? Trust is gained, right? Thank you for the likes, boo. Make sure you subscribe. And so trust is gained, and so they taught the European invaders how to grow the crops. So their first successful crop, what they did was they shot weapons in the air, okay? And when they did that, the native tribes were like, oh, they're under attack, okay? And so they came to help, okay? And when they came to help, they were told, oh, no, it's not that. It's just we successfully grew our first crop. And so that's actually what happened. But to hear these schools tell us what happened, it's, oh, the pilgrims made a feast and they invited the Indians to come and eat. And it was this celebration about just giving thanks for everyone and not holding grudges. And that's what us in present day should do. But then the schools are extra vicious because they say, oh, and Christopher Columbus discovered these savages. And the whole shit just pisses me the fuck off. That's why my kids are homeschooled, as you guys know, because I don't have time for this shit. I don't have time. I don't have time for this shit, like, at all. So, yeah, that's the story. The live, I don't know when it cut out because of reception, but YouTube likes to play with us. Because it will keep this active, like there's people in here, and then it's like it's cut it off. So, for example, I had a conversation with my mama last night. Those are beautiful flowers. I had a conversation with my mom last night, and because, you know, Thanksgiving is coming, and we know that because they celebrate. I don't know, in the 1500s, okay, Christopher Columbus himself was brought up on freaking charges by Europeans for being a dastardly individual, okay? Like, what would be the equivalent of, like, just genocide, right? Rape, torture, abuse, like, all this shit. He was brought up on charges in the 15. This is a time when the slave trade, chattel slavery, everything was violent. So anyway, in the conversation with my mom, I talked about how crops, right? So there's crops right over here. I don't know what the hell happened, but that's good. So I was actually telling my husband that the reason I loved living in Wisconsin is because all you see is like farmland, and it's really cool. Oh, thank you, boo. I can't. You're still here. I thought the connection was bad, but anyway, so crops. So if you don't know how to make food, right, you don't survive, right? And so as soon as the indigenous people taught the invaders how to make food, it was essentially the beginning of the end of the land. You know, that's land back movement. But anyway, what I'm noticing right now in the US is with all of these farmers losing their farms and corporations like McDonald's buying the land and things like that, Microsoft buying the right farming. You think it's computers now, these bitches farming. And so with all of that going on, and they're driving like private farmers, small farmers, to sell their farms because they can't afford it. Y'all are paying attention. They're gonna snatch that up. And I take it right back to the days of, like, you know, today is Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day. I take it right back to that and seizing the means to actually grow your food. And now it's gonna be controlled by private companies. And I'm just like, oh my God. And then you look at cities, right? I can only look at the cities in Minnesota because that's where I'm at. And there's all sorts of zoning ordinances. Oh, you can't grow your food. You can't do this. You can't do that. Meanwhile, an egg is $15. One egg is 15 fucking dollars. Like, you're not gonna get killed. This shit's fucking crazy. So I was talking to my mom about this last night because I think once a week I tell her that, like, I'm really upset that I'm in America and not in, if we had to go to the West to flee, you know, for freedom and all of this shit, like, this is not the place to come, the United States. But again, one thing about it is, you know, God is in control, and my mom is very, very, very close to our Creator, right? And so I can see why, you know. And you know, I do have a calling. What the hell? I do have a calling. And so all I can do is make sure that I'm hearing. Bitch. Oh, Jesus. Those are my tires, by the way. And I don't know if I need to get my tires changed. I was telling my husband that, like, I feel like my tires are a little flat. And he like, no, they're not. And so I'm like, okay. But, like, it's, you know, like, the way my shit be spinning, I don't know. I think that I should get new tires, but I need to remember to say that to him. So, anyway, back to the story. Or back to my thoughts, my philosophies. So, anyhow, I was telling her that now these private corporations are seizing all this shit. And the people are really fighting over, it's just so stupid. Fighting over skin color. And meanwhile, the machine itself is just grinding. And people like, you know, your city managers, your chiefs of police, your city council members, sometimes your mayors, depending on your city, right? They will feed the machine and make sure that that stays intact because they hope that they can also benefit like the billionaires. And sometimes, like a lot of the city council members in the town that I live in, it is okay just knowing that the police is not going to fuck with you. Your life may still be shit. You may still not be really able to make ends meet. Your mortgage may be fucking killing you. You know, your wife may be a receptionist at a healthcare agency, and your job is like as a number, but you manage like apartments. But you bought a house, you struggled, you bought a house, and now you're on city council. And because of that, you're gonna think that you've made it. I can give other examples. You know, you move from Richfield to St. Anthony, and you exploit your identity as a white female that can't have children biologically. And then you get into the St. Anthony system and you become, I don't know, let's say director of community services. And then you start making yourself ombudsman or whatever. And then you use people of color, you know, for your goals to show that, oh, I'm not racist, whatever. You end up on city council and then you end up as a mayor, for example, you know, for example, you know, and you in there really laughing, and all of it happened to be the Muslims in the community, laughing in their face as you're sitting there. It is, I mean, these people are disgusting, you know? And it's like, you sit there, like these people, no, she, like people, let me not be too direct, but that is a public figure and I can do that, but I don't want to do too much, you feel me? But like, it's like, you're disgusting because this is about you and you having a privilege, right? That's beyond the privilege of like regular schmegular folks, and exploiting your position in any way you can and exploiting people. And that's just fucking disgusting. When I was on the city planning commission, I remember like there were community members that had held the views that I hold, okay? That were reaching out to me to do some shit. And I didn't want to, like, I was looking for my own city leadership to have those voices come to the table. You feel me? And obviously we see how that went. I didn't take it upon myself to sort of like represent and carry and make like declarations about what I can do or start to fucking like fuck shit up, like, you know what I mean, just for the fuck of it. You know, I didn't do that because at that point I'm employed, right, by this organization, and you got to do it in a diplomatic way. Now, what I could do and what I did do is I put a Black Lives Matter thing as my face in the system, like how you put like your image or your avatar, right? I put the Black Lives Matter thing. And that's really all I did. And I tried to start conversations amongst us about like, hey, the city of St. Paul has people of color that they're hiring for public works. They have, you know, this and that. And of course, nobody was talking. Nobody wanted to have a conversation. And I left 3 years later in that same position where nobody was having conversations. However, they did do a lot of direct attacks to me because of this, right? So, I mean, cement in like my fucking boulevard, for example, so that I don't have grass. Even though one of your city priorities is to have grass, green stuff, right? Get people in the community who don't really have anything better to do, and they're not going to amount to shit either. They have not amounted to shit, to start shit, right? With me, with us. Call us the N-word. Call us like all of this stuff. And they did a lot of that. Still doing a lot of that, actually. Bring me up on ridiculous fucking charges because somehow my crime scene is my address. You know? Like, that's where... oh, absolutely ridiculous shit. And what I'm saying is, it's so crazy that because I've seen the people that the mainstream media here or the local media likes to show as activists, right? These are the people, and you never, so how can I say this? I have to even be careful about how I talk about it now. Oh my God. People do activism in different ways. And all the ways are valid, okay? Just because I wouldn't personally do some of the filibuster or whatever they try, you know, just because I wouldn't personally use that method does not mean that I'm gonna like condemn somebody who uses that method, right? Just because I'm not going to like commit a crime, right, during a protest or a rally that I'm organizing, doesn't mean that if a crime is occurring, right, I then turn around and name that person and blah, blah, blah. If it's a crime that doesn't involve loss of human life or injury to human life, if it's literally like what they call like the looting and the pillaging and things like that, and it's an institution that has enough fucking insurance, that has enough, like I'm not associated with that, and I'm making sure that the folks in my group are not doing that shit. But I'm not going to then put myself in danger, okay, and go and confront somebody who's doing what they're doing, okay? And so that's just my philosophy, right? And that's the philosophy of a few people, right? And so anyway, it's just really unfortunate that like the accusations are like basically she's using her First Amendment right. Like that is the accusation. She's using her First Amendment right. And when we use our First Amendment right, we lose track of where we're at because her arguments are so compelling, or what she's doing distracts us. So we're going to be upset about that. And we're going to use white nationalism to punish her because she's now making us ineffective in our First Amendment right. And we're pissed that she's so effective with her First Amendment right. That story is really central to many, many women who are like me in this country. Very central. In other countries, they don't necessarily have, like freedom of speech. But the difference is it depends on who you are. It depends on who you know. Well, that's not really a big difference because there's that here too. And so there's freedom of speech for thee, but not for me. And so it's interesting to see that happening like more visibly in this country as well, because it's always been like that. You cannot tell me that in a country where in 1970 there was still a freaking plantation operating, 1970, there was still a plantation operating, okay? You cannot tell me that in a country where that happens, that it's absolutely applied equally. You can't, that the Constitution is applied equally. You cannot fucking tell me that. Because, I mean, you can say it, right? A lot of people say it, but like, never, never, never. I will never agree. Never. Because that is absolute fallacy. It is a fucking farce, and it's an insult. It's an insult, I think, namely to the indigenous people, and kind of sort of like on an equal level in a lot of ways to the descendants of chattel slavery. And so anyway, the direct descendants of chattel slavery, because they all came from where I came from, West Africa. You feel me? I don't care. So you can't tell me that these are not my ancestors too. But because I'm not a direct descendant, right, of chattel slavery, I do understand that I may not be entitled, and probably should not be entitled, to true reparations. But it doesn't mean that I don't fight for the descendants, right, of chattel slavery to be able to get their reparations, because it would be absolutely fucking ridiculous not to. But anyway, I'm cussing a lot, and I've been talking for 24 minutes. I want to see what parts YouTube cut off, because it always cuts off the fun parts. But those of you that are in here, I hope that you've enjoyed it. Make sure you like and you subscribe. Love you. God bless you.